Hello, and welcome to the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. I am so excited to welcome my guest, Mikey Kamuda. Mikey is the host of the Mikey on Mute podcast, opening up the conversation on mental health to make talking about it less taboo. On the podcast, he shares an overview of his mental health journey, including his times of being ready to leave this world, different types of therapy, and how he continues to learn and grow to this day. He's a father of two boys, aged 13 and 16, and recently married his wife in October of 2024. Mikey is currently talking to others about their mental health journeys and wants to make more connections to understand the perspectives that he's unable to see. Welcome, Mikey.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. I'm so excited to be here. We have connected on Instagram for quite some time. You were one of the first accounts I followed when I got on there. And so it is an absolute pleasure to finally be making this conversation happen.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I feel the same way. And just the way that you support other people too. Like you shared like my episodes and we've been mutually supporting each other. So it's just an honor to actually have this conversation with you.
It is. We've been able to hear each other through episodes and things like that, but this is our first time talking, and it's really great to, like I said, finally be able to talk to you. Other than we've had plenty of conversations through messaging, but I'm so thrilled. This has been something I've been looking forward to for a long time.
Oh, yay. I'm excited also. And before we dive right into our topic for today, can you tell me what are three things that keep you motivated on a daily basis and why?
Absolutely. So, three things that keep me motivated on a daily basis would be my family. My wife has been a constant support system for me, and my sons always give me that extra push to be able to break some generational things that have not gone so well in the past and show them how to be better by getting better myself and showing them and learning that, failing as an adult is going to happen. And so my family is really a giant motivation each and every day for waking up. Secondly, I'd say my personal self value. Each day gives me another chance to give myself more of that evidence that I need in order to build my confidence up. I talk a lot about needing to give myself more self compassion and all of that, and how I can do that is leaning back into what are my values, and am I living each day based on those values? And I think in a third way, which sounds weird, but external validation is also a motivation for me, especially since starting the podcast. I think that having those connections, not only is it a good support system, but it gives me the motivation saying, hey, I know I don't feel like it, but I have some people that are waiting for this episode to come out. And as long as it's not adding extra stress, it is a good kind of motivation to go, hey, there are people waiting on me. So I'd say those are roughly the three things that motivate me each and every day.
Wow, I love that. Like, especially when you talk about that external validation, I just really like the fact that, it does motivate you because I don't really think about it too much. But like with the podcast, it's like people don't understand the complexities of like recording an episode, then editing, and then, promoting it. And it's just a lot of work that goes into that. So I like that you mentioned the listeners, people want to hear from me, and that's like a motivator to keep you going too.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime I get feedback from somebody, I swear this is one of the most positive communities I've been a part of, the podcast community online. And they just really, those messages that say, your episode made a difference. I really enjoyed what you said. those words motivate me each and every time. I feel like, do I want to keep going? Do I want to, am I still bringing something to the podcast? And then I get one of those messages and it kind of relights that fire for me.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. That's like a huge motivator for me as well. And it's also like getting to meet people like you who want to continue the conversation surrounding mental health. And today we're going to be talking all about men's mental health. And so, what are your thoughts on the stigma surrounding men expressing their emotions and seeking help for their mental health?
The stigma surrounding men and mental health and reaching out is something that is really deeply rooted in our society. I see it in media, whether it's music or TV, film, stories that our parents and grandparents passed down to us. You get these almost generational proofs, quote unquote, that this is what a man should be or should not do. And they start to really dig into you and they change how you're going to go about your life in every way. They shape your path. And so the stigma really is, hey, in order to be successful in life, you have to reach certain goals. You have to have achievements. And this is men and women, but as far as men in particular, hey, you're going to be judged by sizes of things that you have no control over. You're going to be judged by how many people you are with, or if you're married by a certain point, if you have so many kids, if you have this much money, if you can grow facial hair. And it's just a lot of different pressures to put on men. So it can be tough. I know growing up, whenever mental health was mentioned, it was always a very negative basis kind of on that. And if you talked about needing help, you were seen as weak. You were seen as, well, what? You don't shouldn't need help with mental health. What are you doing? Go grab a beer, sit down with the guys, and be fine. And that was our way for so long. And so I think it is really something that is stronger than we want to put admit to, I guess. It's great to sit here and say, "Oh, I'm not, going to be like my dad. I'm not going to be like my grandpa and all that stuff." But unfortunately, we are all kind of given this idea early on in life about how we're supposed to act, and those are really, really hard things to break and branch off from. So the more we can talk about it and normalize it and everything like that, that stigma, I do see little cracks in it coming up. We're in 2025, still a long way to go, but there are cracks, and I hope that we can continue to break that down.
Yes, I definitely agree, especially with what you said about societal norms being impressed upon us at such an early age. And it also like forces men to suppress their emotions because they're so focused on, okay, I have to be a provider or I have to be masculine and, just tough and everything. And they don't really have the space to be able to have those conversations. And I really love your podcast and how you decide to dismantle that stigma altogether. I really want to know, like, what made you want to start your podcast, Mikey on Mute?
It's a great question. As far as what made me want to start the podcast is a loaded question in a way. I've always wanted to talk about it in some sense, at least in the last 5 years or so. Anyone that listens to the show, I can kind of just give you a brief one, but 5 years ago is when a lot of my mental health journey started as far as me paying attention to it. And I wanted to tell people about it as I was getting help. I'm no expert, I'm not a therapist by any means, but I had the idea of like, how do I get the story out here? How do I get the message out? I tossed around the idea of writing a book, maybe, write down some things and get that published. Sounded like a lot of work. I have hard time concentrating long enough to write something as long as a book. So maybe one day we'll get to it, a voice to text and I can write it for me or something like that. But ultimately, in the last year or so, I had to take a really hard look in the mirror again with my mental health. And I wanted to be able to journal a few things. Kind of going back to what I just said, I'm not big on writing. It takes a lot for me to sit down and write. So I thought maybe like a voice journal would be helpful. Maybe if I talk some things out. Additionally, what it could help me with is I have a lot of memory issues. I don't know if it's mental health or just me in general, but I have these gaps in my timeline almost, and it's really hard to dig those out through just normal therapy. So my therapist suggested, do a little bit of voice journaling. See if you start to tell the story, you might start filling in some of your own blanks. And so that's all I was going to do. I was going to tell my story. And then the idea was if I'm already recording it, I should make it available for others to listen to. I
Right.
might not, but why not at least make it an option? I've wanted to do a podcast for a long time. I've always felt this direction to have some sort of medium to talk to other people, and it's been great to connect with others. So it just kind of made sense. And as I started telling my story, it just started to flow. People came and commenting, and that came in the idea of like, well, if I'm struggling and people are, relating with it, I'm sure they have a story to tell too. So that's kind of the long-winded answer about how I decided to start the podcast.
Wow, I love that. And I just also love that it started off as like a voice journal because it's like, in recording. And sometimes when, you want to create and you want to do like a lot of different things, it starts off as something totally different from what you're doing now. And I do resonate with that because originally I also wanted to do like little diary entries or like blog posts and then just post them online for people to read. And I'm like, if I share my story, I'd rather like talk about it. So, yeah, I resonate with that.
It's so interesting when we start things as one thing and it becomes this whole new project. And I love that idea. Just if we see that in projects, we can see that in ourselves too. It's all about evolving and growing and things like that. And one of my favorite things that I've ever learned in any therapy or group session or hospitalization is we can never go back to square one, which is a great phrase for me because I constantly was telling myself, "Oh, I failed. I tripped back to square one." And so
Mm.
the idea that no, you are a work in progress. And just because you started in one direction and wound up going in a different one doesn't mean you failed. So I like that as, as far as projects and looking internally at myself too.
Oh yeah, that's really good. Like that's a great reminder that we are always trying to be the best versions of ourselves. And regardless of what that will look like in the moment, like you're always having a journey and you're always continuing to transform. So that's really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So, speaking of transformation, in your own mental health journey, how have you learned to openly express your emotions despite that being heavily stigmatized? Hello again. Before you dive into the rest of today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support and for hitting that play button. If you want to expand on that support, here are 3 ways that you can do so. 1. Leave a review. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, or you would want to share about how the podcast changed your life, you can do so by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. 2. Check out our shop. The Rough Edges shop is a faith based, women of color owned online shop where you can get a variety of products from tote bags, journals, t shirts, and more. 20% of the proceeds go to a mental health organization. So check it out at roughedgespodcast.com/shop. 3. Connect on social media. Rough Edges is on a wide variety of social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and more. If you want to connect outside of listening to the podcast episodes, you can do so on these platforms. If you have any questions, you can check out the episode description or stay to the end for more information. Now, enjoy your episode.
That is a great question. How have I been able to kind of go about my journey, even though it is heavily stigmatized? Because I have a lot of those hurdles that other people do, and talking about it, I had people around me telling me I was weak and all of that back in my past and everything. So I think one of the biggest things, and I kind of touched on it briefly earlier, was when my therapist brought up the idea of values based living. And I realized I was doing actions or living for other people. And that can be being a people pleaser, or it can show up in different ways. But I was acting in a way that others wanted me to. I was fitting that societal norm, really worried about things like I can't fix a car. How am I going to hang out with this group of guys over here and all this stuff? So I think once my therapist brought up the values based, it kind of was a turning point. At first, I laughed it off. I was like, "You want me to write down what's what's valuable to me and how I can stick with it? This sounds like one of those mantras I'm never going to repeat and all that stuff." And so I almost dismissed it right away, but after a while, kind of took it and gone, okay, that makes sense. So if I'm making actions and behaviors that match my values, it doesn't matter if I'm reaching a societal norm. It doesn't matter if people are saying like, well, this makes you weak. Well, if it makes me weak, it also fits my value of being alive. It fits my value of being better for my sons and
Mm.
all of this. So maybe two things can be true at the same time. You can see me as weak and it's still one of my values. I'm going to keep headed and go forward and do it. So that takes a lot. I talk a big game, but it is a lot harder to do in real life, especially if you do come from a past of people pleasing. It's
Mm.
really hard to take your own values into consideration. But once you do, at least for me, it was such a turning point in my mental health journey.
Wow, that's amazing. And I also appreciate the values driven philosophy because it not only makes you aware of things that you need to take care of for yourself to improve your own life, but it also teaches you to not really buy into what everybody else is telling you to do and what people are expecting of you. And once you let go of those expectations, it makes it easier for you to not only trust yourself and your own instincts and things that you need for your life, but it makes you more hyper aware to okay, how am I going to navigate the world as me, as myself, and not what society expects of me or what other people expect me to do.
Really opens your eyes. It's crazy. It's almost as if people older than us told us, don't do something to impress your friends or something. Oh, wait, they may have done that. Yes, that's right. But it's hard to understand. With my sons, I have a 13-year-old and 16-year-old. They're at those ages where it's very important to be liked by your peers and do what is, cool and everything like that. And you can tell I'm absolutely cool by the way I just said that. So, but it is eye opening once you go, I'm living by what is important to me. Not only does it keep you on track, it starts to really adjust your circle around you. You start to find out whose colors are true to you, who's going to stick by you. And you find out that some of these friends or acquaintances you've associated with for a while do not have the same values. And you kind of have to make a choice. Is it okay for them to, still influence your life, or is it time to move on? And those are
Mhm.
really hard things. But I think the more we discuss that, the better our own lives can be.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And that's also part of the growth in the journey. Like learning, okay, what are things that actually benefit me? What are relationships that actually help me grow more? Like assessing all of that is a crucial part of moving forward through your journey. I do want to share some statistics with you. They come from SelfSpace, which is a mental health website. And these statistics state 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health, and 29% of those say that they are too embarrassed to speak about it, while 20% say that there is a negative stigma. What are your thoughts on these statistics, and do any of them ring true for you?
Absolutely. With those statistics, I think that they are both mind blowing in a way that that's a large number that I think a lot of people don't realize how much is out there. It also is one of those things that, yeah, that makes sense. I can see how that can be a big thing. And I do resonate with a lot of them, especially the not reaching out. I didn't reach out for a long time. I was on mute, as my name was, for almost 3 decades before I even said anything about my mental health. I thought that, if I stayed silent and just dealt with myself internally, I could please everyone else. Maybe the mental health demons would go away and everything would be good and all that stuff. But I do want to make sure men know it's okay to talk about this so we can change those statistics to make it all right to reach out. I look at it the same way, if you hurt your leg, you're biking or something like that and you fall off and hurt your leg, you go to the doctor. You don't just say, I'm a man, I probably shouldn't go to the doctor because my leg hurts. Maybe some of us still do that too. I mean, I can be a little stubborn sometimes. It might take a little extra to get me going to the doctor, but same thing. Like if you are dealing with things, reach out regardless of what that stigma is. And I'm telling you right now, as somebody that's been at rock bottom, you don't have to be at rock bottom to reach out for help and ask. It's
Mm.
actually better to reach out early and get some signs. And if you're not sure if you're even struggling, if you're one of these, statistics where you're too embarrassed to talk about it, go to your doctor if that's a safer place for you to talk to about and say, like, because a lot of these things will come up as physical symptoms first. So go to your doctor and talk about things that maybe aren't embarrassing to you. Like, doctor, I'm not getting enough sleep. My muscles have been achy for like 2 months now. Talk about those things. And I think the more you can have those kind of conversations, hopefully we'll see those numbers drop as far as who's too embarrassed to talk about it.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree about the comparison between the physical and mental health because it's true. If we see somebody with like a broken leg or a broken arm, we're more sympathetic. We're, oh, are you okay? But when it comes to mental health, and I think it's largely because it's an invisible illness that you're dealing with, a lot of people are looking at you on the surface and are saying, okay, what do you have to be depressed about? Like, you're successful, you're doing great. And they don't really understand the weight of what it means to have a mental health condition. And I love also that you said being in spaces where it's more comfortable for you to talk about it. Like maybe a therapist is a little too much of a step. Maybe you could talk to a doctor first or somebody that you trust. So, yeah, I appreciate just those avenues that people can speak out more.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's a lot if you've especially never been to therapy, it's a lot of the unknown. And when it comes to mental illness, that's what drives a lot of us, up in our anxiety and depression is the unknown. So I get it. So with my doctor, I would go for these, 45-minute annual visits. 40 minutes of it, we could talk about fantasy football and 5 minutes about what's going on with my physical health. Why couldn't I take 5 minutes to just go, hey, something else has kind of been off, and it was game changing. It was something, this was another person I could talk to. My doctor's another man, so that's another positive man in my life that I could talk to, which is great. And I think that just, if you don't feel comfortable with a therapist, you don't feel comfortable with a doctor, start with a friend. And if you're worried if that friend's going to leave you because you talk about mental health, maybe it's time you reevaluate that friendship in the first place. Again, this is not my place to tell anybody. It's really hard to talk to anyone. But yeah, you don't
Mhm.
have to go from 0 to 60. You don't have to go from never talking about it to talking to a therapist. Find someone you're comfortable talking to and just start the conversation. You'd be surprised how when you start how easily you can let it out. As you can see, I love to word vomit. So as soon as it starts to come out, you might just be gushing about what's going on inside.
Yeah, honestly, I really appreciate that because a lot of people don't know where to start. And I think that's like the first step in like really creating more safe spaces, especially for men to really speak about their emotions. And I come to find out, especially like in my own relationships, with like other friends and everything, just you being that space to listen more than like giving advice or feeling compelled to steer them in the right direction. Like most people just need somebody to listen to them. And that's like a crucial part about creating that safe space.
That is spot on and some of the best advice and words you can speak out there. There are plenty of times where I have had friends come to me and vent, and I immediately want to go into fixer mode and see how can I make this better. And so one of the biggest things that I've learned with this is sometimes you just have to ask. You need someone to listen to, you need advice. I had someone tell me earlier today when I was like, "What do you need from me?" And they said, "I just need you to listen. That's
Mm.
all." And it's huge. It makes a huge difference. And I think if we take that approach to it versus trying to be the superhero to fix
Mhm.
everything, which I think a lot of us feel we have to. This person reached out to us, now we have to fix it. No, start by asking them if they just need to be heard. I know sometimes I feel better if I can just vent it out for 10 minutes.
Yeah, same here. And that's really all we need is that trusted person or that space to feel more comfortable in speaking out. And in terms of seeking support for your mental health, like what was your experience in seeking support and how did you overcome any difficulties with starting that?
I've had a lot of struggles as far as when it came to especially therapy in the beginning. So I knew within the last 5 years that I needed therapy. I had some, major different life events happen. And so I thought, hey, you go into therapy, they fix you and all that stuff. And I wound up in this pattern of, I guess, understanding that not every therapist is a match for you. I thought that just all therapists across the board were good to fix you. And so I reached this point with each therapist where I would get to them, I'd vent to them and, oh, poor me, this is what's all happened to me. And we would get, 4 or 5 months into the sessions. And that became a point where, like, okay, now we have to start doing something about it. And I would just drop that therapist, stop going. I was not about to take accountability for that. I was not about to work on myself. You're supposed to fix me by now. That's what I paid you for, right? And so I had to look at myself and go, hey, you've gone through like 3 or 4 therapists now. And so it was this kind of that's fork in the road. Either A, therapy's not for me, which is for some people. I understand that. Or B, which is the path that was I am not giving them the time and space to be able to help me. I'm not giving them what they need. I'm expecting them to be some sort of miracle worker when they're not. And so I had to really take into my, look in that mirror and go, if I want to make a change, I need to look for the right therapist that's the right fit and actually, kind of reach when I reach that point of catching them up, I need to make an action plan and follow through with it. So I
Hmm.
think just understanding that not every therapist is a match for you. And B, you have to do some of the work yourself, most of the work, let me tell you. Those were the two kind of hurdles I had when I was seeking out help.
Yes. And honestly, I love that you said that most of it is you doing the work because I also initially thought, like when I first went to therapy, I thought, okay, great. I'm going to this person, we're gonna talk, and I'm gonna feel better and not have to worry about it again. But I also appreciate the fact that in therapy, it's not a one size fits all approach. It's very particular in terms of like what you want to work on and you have to do the work. Like when you go to the session and when you leave the session, by the time you have another session coming up, you have to have at least tried to make some actionable step to change. And I appreciate that you highlighted the reality of actually going through the therapeutic process.
Yeah, it was tough when there were days I would not know what I was going to talk about. So instead of discussing that, I would just call in, cancel my appointments, push it off and all that stuff. And it was one of those points where I'm going, okay, this seems to be a pattern. It can't be all the therapist pattern. It's probably a me pattern and kind of looking at that. Part of the one of the biggest struggles of the therapeutic journey, I think, is when we have to take accountability and understand that, one, getting on some medicine is not going to fix everything. Going to therapy is not going to fix everything, but it's a combination of what you can do. And that you have to be a little bit more of that catalyst. It's the little kick in the butt we all need, but I think it's a great turning point in all of our journeys.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I also wanted to know, like, have you ever felt that you weren't man enough if you struggle with mental health issues? And if so, how do you manage that feeling?
I would say every single day of my life, probably still to this point, as far as are there days I don't feel man enough. That is one of the biggest stigmas for me that still sticks. I have these should statements in my head as far as how much money I should make, what I should be providing to my family. And then I go back to, can I, fix cars? No, I can't fix cars. I take mine in to get an oil change. It's much easier that way. But I have these ideas in my head that were put in there, whether it was from childhood or media, just things around me, people talking. And yeah, it definitely feels like I'm not man enough. I go to therapy. I enjoy things like musicals. I'm wearing a Wicked shirt right now. So I have definitely had plenty of days where there's been things that I've enjoyed or not been able to do. And it's definitely said, hey, that doesn't really make you very manly or masculine. And so it's tough. And so in order to combat that, have to work more on self-compassion, going, hey, you're right. I can't change my own oil. But you know what? That's okay. There are plenty of people out there that can't. That's why they have stations for you to go to that will do it. They wouldn't have it there if everyone is expected to do it.
Right.
They don't assign you some masculine man at, the time you get a car, here's your driver's license and here's your service, man. I think a lot of us probably would appreciate that, but I think just giving yourself that self-compassion, understanding that suffering is a part of that journey and life, and sitting with that uncomfortable, it's not fun at the time, but it really does help combat those thoughts of not being manly enough.
Mm. Wow. I also appreciate what you said about self-compassion because I feel like that's a very important component of the healing journey, especially when you're dealing with a lot of stigmatization, especially with the notion of being man enough. Like, what does that even mean? Like when we look at it. And so, like, a lot of the times people are so beholden to what we should be doing. Like you said, you have a lot of shoulds in your head. I also have a lot of shoulds, like especially as a woman, it's like, oh, I should be doing this and should be doing that. But it's just when we remove all of those constructs and really look at you as an individual, it's all about what uniqueness that you could bring to the table. And the things that you love are uniquely you, and it's what makes you human and who you are. And so, hey, you love musicals. I love musicals too. There is nothing wrong with that. Like, those are the things that make you you. And I also appreciate that you're learning more to embrace like that self-compassion.
It's been one of the toughest things I've had to learn is being nice to myself. We have great compassion and empathy for others. We're able to, when somebody is down, we're able to point out their strengths and what they bring to this world. And yet, when we feel down, we don't do the same in return usually.
Mhm.
It's really hard for us to see our positives. So that's been one of my biggest tools in learning how to get through my mental health journey here, especially when I do come across those are, man enough shoulds and all that stuff. Just build in some self-compassion. Much easier said than done, but it's a game changer.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. And speaking of like the stigma and changing some elements of it, if you could change at least two stigmas about how society views men's mental health, what would you change?
I would say if I could change at least two stigmas in how society views it, the first one would be that men need to be the ones to hold the entire household together. I know we come from different backgrounds and everything like that it can change from household to household. For when I grew up, I was told the man is the one that takes care of everything. Financially, you're the one that, is the answer for if someone comes to the door, you might not be the one answering the door, but you are the one making that decision. Say it's a salesman at the door. And so this idea that you have to put everyone else's needs before your own. You can't
Mm,
have these weak moments. You have to be there to take care of everyone else. I want to break that stigma that or change it even that you are valid to have emotions and that you don't have to take the entire world on your shoulders. Your value does not get determined by whether or not you are able to pay your mortgage or your rent. Your value doesn't, go on. Did you bring in enough money to the household? And so that's one stigma I'd want to change for sure. The second stigma I really want to change is that alcohol is one of the only band-aids us as men have to do it. I have family members that struggle with alcoholism. I've seen friends do it. When I went through my separation and divorce, I went through it where I thought that was what you did. I never have been a big beer drinker or anything like that. It just, again, one of those probably manly things that I prefer my drink to taste a little bit more, I don't know, good tasting and not beer tasting. But I always just thought, I saw my dad with a beer in his hand if he had a rough day at work. I've seen friends go out to bars if they were having rough patches in their life or they got into a fight with their spouse and they would go out and drink. And so it's almost like we were told this is what you're allowed to do. If you are having emotions, this is how you're going to suppress them. And so I'd
Mhm.
love to break that stigma, understand there are so many other ways to get that out and help. Maybe therapy is not for you. Maybe, they have rage rooms now where you can go and pay some money and break a bunch of stuff. That can be therapeutic for you. You can go out and find a hobby that works for you. I'm not into fishing, but you could find something like that or hiking, board games. And just there are definitely other ways out there that are acceptable. Please don't ever keep that thought that alcohol's your only way. There's a responsible way to enjoy it. I'm an adult and I will responsibly enjoy it from time to time, but if it is something that doesn't help your mental health, then I would definitely suggest, there has to be other ways to do it. And so I just want to break that stigma. This doesn't have to be your only band-aid.
Mm. Wow, those are great ones. And especially the first one about men needing to take care of everything, especially in the household. I it's just like so much to unpack, but I do appreciate the fact that, and it also goes back to the self-compassion of it, but knowing that it's okay to lean on others for support. Like that is the biggest thing in terms of like your mental health journey, but just life in general. Like knowing that it's okay to say, "Hey, I need some help." And nowadays, men are not like the sole breadwinners anymore. Like, you know, they don't have to bear the burden of that alone. And I think we're moving towards more of a collaborative effort when it comes to, providing for the household or even in leadership. Like, I often like think about how men are just so conditioned to be like, oh, I'm the ultimate provider. I have to have everything covered. Like it's all me. I'm paying for everything. Like it doesn't have to be that way. And just knowing that you can take that burden off of yourself and really reach out for that help, like it's not a sign of weakness. It is the greatest strength because we all have a point in our lives where we have to recognize that we are human beings and we could only do so much as our bodies and our minds and our emotions would allow. So, yeah, just take the pressure. And for anybody listening to this right now, guys, take the pressure off of yourself. Like it doesn't have to always fall on you. Like you can ask for support. And I just love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I'd love to just kind of reiterate that to any men listening. I think one of the biggest things I've struggled with is being vulnerable to have discussions about things like finances or things that you think should be on your shoulders as a provider. Have
Mm.
those conversations with your partners, with your spouses, with your family members, because it opens up so many things when you can communicate and ask for help. Maybe it's not them giving you money. Maybe it's them offering a different perspective or idea. Maybe, my wife's very good about looking up different providers if we're paying too much for something. She's like, hey, why don't we just research it and, look elsewhere and everything like that. And I was never even think I would just sit here and complain about it instead of doing that. So definitely reach out to somebody else and have that, start opening conversation about things that you think might be all on you. And you'll soon realize that we can collaborate so much easier.
Yes, yes, we need each other. And that's something that's not often talked about, especially when it comes to men seeking support or having support. It seems like you're the last resort and everything is on you instead of, hey, you can have those conversations and you could be vulnerable and ask people for support. And it doesn't have to be a sign of weakness or you can't do it on your own. It's just that you recognize that you need others. Like we're not meant to be on our own or we're not meant to do life by ourselves.
For sure. We're even going back to caveman days, we are pack animals and we do better in groups.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and so I also wanted to talk about what are like helpful ways that we can encourage men to seek support for mental health. So, what do you think are some helpful ways that we can start to encourage men to speak out and seek help for their mental health?
I think some of the best ways to encourage men to speak out are doing what we're doing now, which is just having a conversation about it. The more we talk about these things in a normal context, we can make it less taboo. That's the whole point of what I want to do. And so I look at it this way. We look up to people around us, our friends, our family members, people in our community, everything like that. So if we see somebody that we respect having a conversation about this, that normalizes and goes, well, maybe I can talk about this. And so you see, maybe it's your friend at the tavern, maybe it's your pastor, maybe it's your, neighbor across the street. But if you're out getting the mail and somebody goes, "Hey, how's it going?" or whatever, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, pretty good. I had a little bout, but I saw my therapist." And it just becomes another part of our everyday conversation. That can be enough of a spark or enough of a catalyst for other men to reach out. So I would encourage people, if you want to help, if you want to get others to start talking, I would say start talking yourself. You don't have to drill down and find out what's going on with every single one of your friends that are, men, and get to the root cause of what happened in their childhood. Trust me, leave that part to the therapist probably unless they reach out to you. But even just talking to them and talking about mental health and going to therapy and everything like that, the more we can have this in a regular everyday conversation, I think it'll just be a ripple effect and really start to touch others in a way that touches us. And I know that sounds kind of cliche in a way, but really that's one of the easiest things you can do. If you have the ability to look up programs around you, there are plenty in different states that offer support groups. Maybe you can make it a day, instead of going out to grab a beer, hey, you want to go catch this, men's group down at the YMCA or something like that and talk to other guys for an hour, maybe play some pickup basketball or something. Just I guess make the more you can make it a normal part of your day, the more we should be able to encourage others too.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I hope that we can reach the point where we normalize having these conversations. And I love how you framed it of like, just bring it up in casual conversations, because that's how it does start. And that's how we can start to break the stigma and raise more awareness about these issues. And I think especially for men, because from a female perspective, it's like we talk about all these things all the time, But like, I imagine for guys, it's more of like, okay, I don't want to come across as, weak or too emotional. So I'm going to deal with this on my own and be self-sufficient. But I love the framing of how you're like, hey, we're just having a conversation, or instead of doing your normal coping mechanism, let's try this. And I agree. That's like a really great way to start.
I've had a lot of friends that I've just said, "Hey, let's go do some activity together, whatever that might be, go catch a movie or something like that. Maybe not a movie, but somewhere you can talk, so whatever that may be." And I just try to bring up how it's been a positive impact in my life. And slowly that starts to get them talking. They see me talking about it and they know that feels like more of a safe space. So yeah, just you don't have to be the end all be all. You don't have to be their therapist, but just making it part of everyday conversation with them, I think that really is going to be life changing for a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. And I can imagine that, through your podcast, you're creating a community in which people could feel more comfortable. Like, what are some additional ways like that you've helped foster that community through your podcast?
The sense of community has been great. And I thought when I first started this podcast that, okay, maybe I'd have this small, very intricate group of people that are interested in talking about it because it's not a topic that's talked about a whole lot. There's not a lot about men's mental health out there. There's plenty as far as like I've found some, but there's definitely not enough. Like if you look at other genres and all that. So thought I would just have that and I'd have these very, strict conversations with people about how can we help this. And then it was finding people in the community that had almost nothing to do with mental health that I've had some really great conversations about. I've talked to people that have done comic book podcasts, people that do true crime podcasts or superstitions. I've talked to people from Australia. I talked to somebody that their whole show is just him and his buddy have a few beers or whatever, and they sit down and talk about pop culture. And we sit down and we have some real conversation. And it's so cool to be able to connect with these people and get it to see that, okay, this is what you hear on their podcast. They show you as much, but on the other end, they're still a human being dealing with emotions. And so I think just being able to take time and ask them, like, hey, if you ever want to come on the show, I'd love to have you, and no pressure to talk about whatever. And usually they're way more willing to talk about things than I ever want to ask them. So I always appreciate whatever they want to share. But yeah, I think just not pigeonholing myself in one spot as far as, hey, you do a mental health podcast, only connect with people that talk about mental health. If I only did that, I mean, I'm sure I'd have a very knowledgeable conversation every week. But going outside the box has allowed me to get some real conversation, raw conversation. I like talking to people from other parts of the country, from different countries, from different backgrounds. I say it very, I'm pretty blunt about a lot of things that have gone on in my life, but at the end of the day, just to, hopefully not too blunt for the podcast or whatever, I'm just a white man from Wisconsin, so I only have so much perspective that I can bring to this conversation. If I can talk to people from other parts of the world or other walks of life, to me, that's just going to help foster that community even more. We're going to have better conversation.
Mm. Yes, and that's one of the things that I appreciate the most about your podcast is that you are not afraid to connect with people from all different walks of life. And it's not like you pigeonholed yourself into like one niche and it's like, oh, I'm just gonna talk to mental health advocates, but you really go out of your way to connect with others to have real and genuine conversations. And it makes me think of how we connected like you just reached out and and then we just started talking. And I appreciate that because that is building a bridge to have more important conversations like this. And so I'm glad that we connected and I'm glad that your podcast is continuing to foster that type of community.
I'm so glad we connected because it was one of those things that when I first joined Instagram, I did kind of just go to the search bar and type in mental health and just see what else was out there. And one of the first accounts that come on is you. And I at first was just going to follow and then go on to the next. And something just was like, okay, you need to wait, like pause, listen, see if this is somebody you want to connect with. I'm like, yeah, true. So I sat down and listened and I was hooked. I was completely hooked by the episodes and it was just so much fun. So yeah, I, I had to shoot my shot as far as connecting and reaching out and said the worst thing that can happen is I get, it's read and never responded to you, but instead you've been nothing but so kind and so sweet. We connect in such a way that we've had so many conversations where just checking in like, hey, how are you doing right now? It's been a few days. I just want to check in. So I can't thank you enough for connecting that and helping build that community for me.
I appreciate that. That's so good. Yeah, and you're doing a great job. So it's incredible just to see like the places that you'll go like in the future.
Highly appreciate your kind words. I've heard a few people go, I'm so proud of what you're doing. And I'm like, I hope so. I hope it's going in a good direction. But that goes back to that self-compassion. I gotta be nicer to myself and agree. Yeah, I'm very excited to see what all of us can do going forward the more we build this.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Mikey, it was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. But before we go, I have one final question for you. What advice or words of encouragement do you have for men who struggle to manage or seek help for their mental health?
If I could speak directly to the men that are scared to reach out about their mental health, I want to tell you that it's valid for you to be scared right now. That's okay. It's okay to feel uncertain about that. What I don't want to be okay is for you not to do it because you do feel scared. The best ways we get through life, the ways we grow are doing things we're uncomfortable with. And so if I can tell you any sort of words that might push you to the next direction, it's just you might be scared and that's okay. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So please just, reach out. And I look at it this way. We've lived our life looking at, this stigma of what we should be as men, and we've gone in the circle. Has it worked for us to this point? For most of us, that answer is going to be no. We're still struggling. Holding ourselves to these standards has not worked. So asking for help, what's the worst that it can do? The worst case scenario is that we go back to how we're feeling and we find a different direction and go. Most of the time, that's going to lead us to other paths and ways to look at it. So I would just advise you, like I said, first off, I want to tell everyone that it's valid. You are allowed to feel those feelings, but I would advise you to take that step because the worst that can happen is that you might find out there are people out there willing to listen to you, that there are people out there willing to help you. And I honestly just want more men to start talking about this. And I think if you have a conversation with your doctor or you talk to the person at the mailbox and take that one step, I'm proud of you. And I really hope others see the steps you take in yourself.
Wow. I love that. Thank you so much. And where can people find you?
You can listen to the Mikey on Mute podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. On Instagram, the spaces are underscores, but it is Mikey on Mute podcast. Once you find me on there, I am sharing out so many things. You'll see my story is overflowing with the podcast I'm listening to. But find me on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, Mikey on Mute, all one word. You can find me there. Otherwise, feel free to always, if you like using email, you can reach out mikeyonmute@gmail.com. You can reach me there.
Awesome. And I'll definitely have those like in the description of this episode. And everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more updates on the podcast, you can follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast, or you can visit the official podcast website at roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.